Without further ado, I'm going to welcome Heidi Sanborn, Executive Director of the National Stewardship Action Council, and Jordan Wells, Assistant Director of the National Steward Action Council, Paul Gao, President and CEO of California Electronic Asset Recovery, and Sam Vanderhoof, CEO of Recycle PV Solar. All of them will be talking tonight, and then we'll have a panel afterwards. And we're going to start off with Heidi Sanborn and Jessica Wells.
Jordan will go ahead and share our screen. Thank you so much, Thomas, for having us and for cooking up this great idea for a panel. Again, my name's Heidi Sanborn. I'm the Executive Director, Founding Director of the National Stewardship Action Council. I've been working in the world of waste management for 30 years, based here in Sacramento. And I've been really evolved to the place where I really believe we've got to drive a circular economy. And I kept seeing a lot of stuff that, was coming out of green tech, but I realized it was only green for what it was doing. We weren't finding a home or figuring out a circular way to use that material at end of life. So I'm really excited about talking about that tonight. And then Jordan Wells, who's our Assistant Director, she will be here at the end. I'm going to have to leave to be at the Child Abuse Prevention Council event. You might recognize I'm also a SMUD board member. So I am a utility geek or a policy wonk, waste, energy, the whole thing. And so that's one of my SMUD activities. So I'll be leaving at 6:30 and Jordan can answer questions after that. But I am very glad to also be here with Paul and Sam because both of them are real leaders in our area in clean tech recycling. And we need to do what we can to help support them and make sure people know about them and send more materials to them. So go ahead and my vision at the National Stewardship Action Council is that we attain a circular economy in the United States. So that's actually what I'm working on day in and day out. We are a 501c4 nonprofit. We had an office in Midtown. We let that go in December because we haven't been able to work there for months. So we decided that Jordan and I would just work from home. We've got a 14-member board and it's very diverse, by the way, so we're very proud of that. And it's of businesses, nonprofits, governments, et cetera. And we're all working to drive to a circular economy and doing that through collaborations and education. You doing presentations like this is a big, way we do that. And you can see our board at a strategic planning meeting a few years ago. So a lot of people ask, what is a circular economy? And we follow the Ellen MacArthur Foundation's definition, which is, basically we can't do the make, take, waste anymore. We're pushing 7-8 billion people on this planet. And if that's our model, we're just fouling our nest. And we cannot, even animals don't do that. We have to really start closing the loop on this stuff and get back to Mother Nature, where every waste material is a feedstock for the next system. So there is no waste. It's the ultimate zero waste system in nature. But we have interrupted that and we have created products and materials that nature does not understand. And it's pollution when it gets out there. So we need to go back to a cradle to cradle approach and really at the point of design, be thinking about how is this material going to be, made durable or repairable or recyclable, and make sure it's got an end of life besides a hole in the ground or a burn plant. That's just not sustainable at all. So we need to actually do three things in a circular economy. We need to design out waste and pollution, keep the products and materials in use, but at the very core of it too, we now have to go back and regenerate natural systems that we have dramatically harmed. And that's where a lot of people forget that piece. But doing less bad is not good enough anymore. We've done too much damage. So it's one thing to make sure we're ending the bad, but we've got to go back and repair the damage we've done. Next slide, please. So that means we have to think a lot differently. A lot of this has been driven from our flow of money and the fact that companies profit by externalizing costs onto the environment and others. And that is simply a model that is destroying the environment. It's not going to work long term. We have to change. So I always say insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. And being less bad is not, it's the same thinking. We have to do good and get to regenerative systems. Next slide, please. So one of the things that we've been really leaning into for many years, I spent a lot of energy fighting with companies and industries that didn't want to green up, didn't want to recycle, didn't want to pay for it, wanted to keep externalizing the costs onto the environment and local governments and others. And that isn't very fun. It takes a ton of energy, and it's more of a battle instead of a partnership. And the good news is the momentum is now behind us on getting to a circular economy. The public realizes we've got to do something. We've got way too much plastic pollution, and we're exporting waste to countries that can't handle it. And people are now realizing we've got to start managing our own material at home and keep the jobs here. And so I was very excited that one of the legislative bills we passed in 2017 actually on carpet recycling inspired a company called Aquafil to site a plant in Woodland called, it is Aquafil. And what they do is it's a zero emissions plant. They have about 50 people working out there, and it's a closed loop system for nylon 6. If you have fishing nets made of nylon 6 or carpet or anything, any widget made out of fabric, made out of nylon 6, they can put it through that plant and come out with beautiful, pure pellets of nylon 6 that are the feedstock for Stella McCartney handbags, Kelly Slater surfwear, interface carpet, and more. It's a wonderful circular economy model. And the biggest problem they have now is they can't get enough feedstock. So if any of you know of any manufacturer or any large company that has a lot of material that's got nylon 6, please let us know, and let's get it over to that Woodland plant so they can recycle it. That's a picture of me with the CEO of the company on the left, Giulio Bonazzi, at their plant in Slovenia, and Franco Rossi on the right. And that is literally a picture at their plant where they store all the plastic fishing nets and things that they actually are paying indigenous people to pull out of the sea. Many of them have overfished, and they need to go get those ghost nets out of the ocean, and they will pay them for them to go back to the plant and recycle them. And they just use steam and heat. They don't use any chemicals in that plant. So we're excited to have it here in California. Next slide, please. So that's a partnership we're proud of. Kind of businesses we're trying to bring to this area include aero aggregates. We've actually already had conversations with the governor's office of business, and we're very excited that they are looking at putting a plant here in Northern California, hopefully in this area, but it might also be in Stockton. We're not sure yet. But what they do is take mixed glass that is multicolored, could be contaminated, stuff that normally in the recycling system is very low value and isn't something we'd use. And they add a foaming agent, which is basically just a mineral, and they heat it and they make rock. And the rock is 85% lighter than quarried aggregate. And the reason that's very, very important is with climate change and sea rise, we are seeing more and more roads inundated that need to be elevated, and buildings need to be elevated. So this kind of rock that's much, much lighter and has no contaminants in it that would pollute the soil are perfect for elevating roads and buildings. And the problem we have now is, what is Caltrans doing and others? They're actually putting giant blocks of styrofoam under these roads, and styrofoam melts when gasoline and petroleum products hit it. So you have almost guaranteed pollution. So we should not be putting polystyrene in the soil, and this is a very safe alternative to that. So hopefully we can get that kind of technology here in Northern California. So I'm working on that right now in partnership with Aero Aggregates. Next slide, please. Another company we're working with is BIOENERGY DevCo. They actually are an anaerobic digestion facility company that wants to site 220 plants all over the United States. They are out of Italy and Europe, and they are well seasoned, well financed, and we are talking to them every few days about trying to get them in Michigan, in Texas, because we've got a lot of organic materials that need a home. If they go into a landfill where it's void of oxygen, what happens? It gets to be methane. And then methane, even with the best capture system at landfills, a lot of it still is released. It's one of the top 3 generators of methane in California, is our many landfills. We've got to get the organics out of the landfills and into facilities like this where we can create biofuels that can be used for all kinds of purposes. So this is exciting, and we are also looking at trying to get them here in California, one north and one south. Next slide, please. And I'm also chairing the statewide recycling commission. There's 17 of us. Waste management is on there, LA County. It's a big group. They elected me chair. We were seated last June and tasked with pretty much solving every waste problem that there is. And we're all volunteers. But we came up with 19 recommendations in 6 months with 17-0 votes, pure consensus, which is very difficult to do all the time in our industry. And nobody could believe we did it. But some of the recommendations are very much related to what we're talking about today. One of them is putting policy approach in place called extended producer responsibility, where the producers of products extend the responsibility throughout the life cycle of the product, not just sell it and walk away with the money. And that is for household hazardous products, which could include batteries and electronics and many of the green tech things that we use. We also have a recommendation on passing legislation on right to repair. There's been a big influx of tech that we can't even get a manual from the companies on how to repair them. They literally don't want us to. They want us to buy the next generation. That's too wasteful. It's got a huge greenhouse gas footprint. And quite frankly, people are frustrated. They paid a lot of money and they can't repair anything anymore. So that is one of the recommendations out of the commission. There are many more, but in case you have interest in following that, many of the recommendations we gave are becoming, they just were introduced on Friday last week into legislation. So it's very exciting to see the legislature take us seriously. Thank you. Next slide, please. And if any of you have ideas that you want the commission to take up, let me know. I've got a form you could fill out and help me get ideas run through the commission. Next, oh, you can go back. I think there was another slide. Yeah. So yeah, I guess I already talked about that, but you can see the commissioners there, including county supervisors, and it's a very, very good group. Next slide. So one of the recommendations was to ratify the Basel Convention. I don't know how many of you know what that is, but the Basel Convention is an international treaty it was first established to deal with electronic waste that was being sent to countries that could not handle it. And it was resulting in children, you know, and people in very crude conditions, very unsafe conditions, dealing with our waste. In fact, we found the state of California logo on computers and the sides of rivers in China. So we were part of the problem, clearly. Well, the Basel Convention hasn't been ratified by the United States. Pretty much every industrialized country in the world has ratified it except us. So what that means is we can still legally send electronics and now deemed hazardous plastic waste to other countries who simply can't manage it properly. They aren't resourced for it. In fact, I just heard yesterday that in Malaysia, they are getting over 350 containers a day of plastic waste from the United States. That is simply, they cannot handle that. And it's going to end up in the sea. It's going to end up all over the place and being open burned. So we have asked that our state ask the Biden administration to ratify the Basel Convention in the first 100 days and get us in line with the rest of the world on this treaty. So that because what's going to happen is our plastics and electronics can be literally caught out at sea right now if a country doesn't want to take it in, and they will just be floating around out there with no place to land. And they might have to repatriate. And it's just a big mess. Next slide, please. And it's ours to clean up. So we're a small but highly effective and highly high profile organization. I've been on NBC Nightly News talking about packaging, worked with Sam and Paul. We've done all kinds of stuff. In fact, Paul came with me when we were presenting to the PUC about this very issue of clean tech and what we're going to do with batteries and solar panels. We've got a long way to go, and we need everyone who's working in tech to help us truly green up the entire supply chain and create circular systems. So please feel free to join us, follow us, and we'll be happy to take questions at the end. So thank you for that. And I guess we can turn it over now to Paul Gao.
Yeah, okay. So our company started in 2000 and time flies. I'm still here to committed to providing responsible e-waste recycling in Sacramento. 10 years ago, we designed our processing plant and call our system Green Machine. And along the way, we did many improvements and added new features to maintain the technical advantage. And 3 years ago, we started actually vertically integrating our service to provide a whole IT asset management service. Next slide, please. So what we do here is, what we do for IT asset management. So we provide a logistics service, and we also do the data security. We provide a certified wiping and shredding service on-site or off-site, plant-based. And we do also remarketing to harvest the components. And we do testing, repair, cleaning, repacking, redeployment, all the service. And by the end of the day, all the end-of-life electronics, we will actually recycle it. Next slide, please. So I want to talk about our green processing technology. So what we say our green machine is we really use a very unique processing. It's a centrifugal force technology. So we spin the material just like at home we are a washing machine. So we spin the electronics, and then the physical collision of the material result in quick liberation and very clean commodity output. And our system process up to 15,000 tons of the electronic waste yearly, and we use 30% less energy compared to similar if we use the knife shredders to process. And next slide, please. So those are the electronic devices we all see, we are familiar with, from the computers, the IT equipment, the TV monitors, the tablets and cell phones, small consumer electronics. This is also included the vaping devices. I didn't put there, Heidi, but that's included in there. Next slide, please. So this is the finished product we produce. So you will see here is the residual materials here. So we have steel, aluminum, copper, circuit boards, plastics, and obviously plastic we call e-plastics. And Heidi talked about it's a big issue for our industry, because the e-plastic, they have very many different kinds mixed together. So how to separate them? Do we have a solution locally, or we all now currently we ship to country like Malaysia for plastic recycling? So these are the topics we have to discuss. And the last picture is the batteries come out from the residual materials. Next slide, please. So here we talk about what do we do and what kind of electronic coming to our facility, and then what is going out from manufacturing process. Now we have many challenges, the challenges for the industry. So what it is the first thing is the increasing volume of battery. You saw the battery picture at the last picture. You saw at the last slide. So the increasing volume of the battery content in electronic devices, especially the lithium-ion batteries, those are difficult to identify costly to remove, and also fire and explosion hazard. So the electronics, the second challenge is electronic devices are getting smaller and lighter, such as like a vaping device. It's tiny. But so this will be less reclaimable material value, more plastic, more battery content, high percentage of the toxic substance like lead, mercury, cadmium, brominate from flame retardants. All those are high processing cost. Next slide, please. So we see the challenges. Also, this is opportunities for our e-waste industry. So that's what our business plan is. So we actually, that's why in the very beginning, I said we are vertically integrating our processing. So we want to be one-stop shop for the product reuse, refurbishing, and recycling, and also collaborating with the manufacturers to provide the recyclability data. So we had a meeting with some of the OEMs, with their designers. So we told them this material is difficult to recycle. And this material, if you put a plastic tape on that, it's hard to separate. It's difficult to machine to process it. So the customer also demand for more environment sustainability solutions. So in a few years ago, they would just say, you know, can you recycle those electronics? But now they demand more. Demand say, can you reuse them? Can you harvest the parts? And then how you can actually turn the plastic to a new product. So I think this is a trend for a circular economy to capture the new value from the retired asset with some standards. So we are working with plastic recyclers, and they try to have some of the standard. And I think UL or TÜV, they are now coming some of the recycled plastic standard. I think this is a great thing. This is the recycling industry and the OEMs and also the standards to work together. So that way is from the designing to sourcing to manufacturing and to reuse, recycling. And then this is a true, I think, circular economy. Next slide, please. Great. So I would just talk about the recycling industry opportunities. Now I want to talk about the green waste from the clean technology. So we always thinking about this clean technology. I think the clean technology will create the green waste. So normally we're thinking about this we're thinking about, green energy. And then we will say PV and the EV. So the solar panels and the electric vehicles. So the PVs, I'm not going to say anything because Sam is the expert, and he is going to talk about it. But I want to talk about the EV battery recycling. So we are also research on that subject. So we project tens of millions of new EVs all sold between now to 2025. And that means tens of millions of battery will need dependable recycling solutions. And the demand for cobalt, lithium, other raw material is really high. And this now becomes a strategic material. So, and also if you see the chart, you can check the chart here, you can see California is really, we are the leader in this EV car market. So that is important for us to have a solution for the batteries. Next slide, please. So we have this CleanStart here. So I think this CleanStart connects all the California region CleanTech community. This is a great thing. I think building a CleanTech industry should include the green waste recycling. This is really, we can achieve the cradle to cradle circular economy. And at the last, I think I want to thank Thomas and the CleanStart, the platform. So we have the opportunity here to talk about this thing. I think we can talk a lot. We can talk the whole night. I just don't have the time to do that. So I hope, after the meeting, please, any questions, email me, and so we can chat further. And thank you so much. And the next slide has my email address.
We'll make sure to put that email address in the chat for people that want to be able to connect with you.
Thank you.
And with that.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for having me. My name is Sam Vanderhoof. I'm CEO of Recycle PV Solar. And our main goal in what we do is to focus on the recycling and proper handling and even repurposing of solar PV modules. That's basically all we do. We don't do electronics or anything else, except when it's in conjunction with the PV solar system, like inverters and things like that. Next. We also partner with a company that's in Europe called PV Cycle, and they're our mentor, but also our partner here in the US. PV Cycle has been doing solar recycling, PV recycling, for more than 13 years now. And they're a nonprofit that has put together the programs and policies throughout Europe to be able to do it in a collective way, in cooperation with stakeholders and the PV industry, to bring down the costs and to facilitate the collection and proper handling of PV throughout Europe, and now expanding into the US with our partnership. Next slide. So our mission is pretty straightforward. We just want to keep solar materials out of the landfills and to take all these materials and reuse them in the best way we know how to. So we've been doing this for we started really about 4 years ago in the beginning, but formally a little more than 2 years ago. Started officially in Tucson, Arizona. We tried to do some recycling in California, but the DTSC regulations were a little too stringent for us at the time. And in order to get started, we moved our facilities into Tucson, and then more recently, we're opening a new plant in Reno, Sparks, Nevada. Next. So I have a long history in doing solar, and I'm part of the problem. For many years, I manufactured PV solar panels and systems and sold them, and so a lot of the systems that are out there, especially ones you see around Sacramento, we manufactured a lot of the components for the systems in Sacramento, the PV Pioneer 1 and 2 systems. There's more than 9,000 systems we're involved with in Sacramento. So a lot of those panels you still see today are part of what we're involved with. And now those systems they're aged. A lot of the systems are 15 to 18 years old, and it's time that they are looking at end of life. We celebrated just a few months ago, California having over 1 million homes now solar powered in California, 1 million homes, and that's growing. And it's growing by 15 to 30% per year. It's not a small task to install these systems, but there is an end of life to all products, including solar. Next slide. So I'm going to go through some of the issues, some of the problems we see, and then offer some solutions as well. So we see that, you know, there is a rapid increase. Even during this last year in COVID, the solar industry increased business, increased installations, I think about 22%, even during the crisis of COVID, and it's not slowing down. It's a clean energy source when it's installed and managed right. But one of the concerns is there's no national programs for recycling at end of life. And there's very few government programs today that encourage that. So we spent a lot of time working on policy throughout the US, trying to encourage stakeholders to engage in new policies that encourage end of life proper handling. And I'll bring this up a couple times, but you know, our partners in Europe have been instrumental in creating the mechanism for 95% of all solar that's decommissioned in Europe is now recycled and handled properly. But in the US, it's less than 10%. So we have a long ways to go. Next slide. So just to bring it in perspective a little bit, most of the solar panels that are coming into the US come from abroad. They come from Asia, some from Europe. There are a few manufacturers in the US, but not that many. But 140,000 panels, and increasing every day, they're being installed. 140,000 panels per day, 7 million pounds of panels every day. It's a huge problem. It's a huge problem if you don't have plans in place to be able to handle those when they're decommissioned. And we'll talk more about why things fail and why modules don't always last as long as we think they should. Next slide. So again, some of the problems that we're seeing. This is a pile of panels that you can see, laminates, that these are you know, in the US today, and most distributors and warehouses across the US have piles of panels, much like this or much worse. The infrastructure needs to happen in the US like it happened in Europe, and we can follow some of the same guidelines that Europe has done. Again, if we're only doing 10% and they can do 95% in Europe, we can follow some of those practices that made that happen. Next slide. So one of the reality checks that I think that being in the industry for as long as I have, you know, almost 40 years, that solar's sold on the premise that it lasts for a long, long time, kind of forever, and needs little or no maintenance. Well, that's a great selling point, but the reality is a little bit different. So we're seeing a lot of defects from installations, recalls, damages just in the transportation, trucking. In California alone, we did a study last year, about 2,000 to 3,000 solar panels per month are damaged just in transit in California alone. So we're seeing, you know, a big issue with solar panels, even though they do last well when they're out and installed, if nothing damages them. We're seeing severe weather problems being a big problem with climate change. More and more systems, like you see, you know, the problems in Texas with weather and ice storms. Solar panels are being damaged on a regular basis. Next slide. So here's the growth of solar. If you look at it, it's not slowing down. It's one of the largest you know, employers in the US right now, and in growing on a regular basis, because it does provide good jobs. It's clean energy. Groups that you know, former employees that were in the coal industries are switching over to cleaner energy technologies like wind and solar, and it provides quite a few jobs and higher paying jobs usually. Next slide. So one of the things that it was hard for us to really understand, you know, being in the industry for so long, is why are these solar panels coming down? Why are they being decommissioned? It's not always because they are broken, but some of the causes, or the biggest problem is weather damage. We're seeing so much weather damage. We worked on a project last year in Texas that was 60 megawatts, and it was damaged by one hailstorm. Came through and smashed the whole system, or most of the system, in a matter of 15 minutes. The system was destroyed. And the problem is that the insurance companies are paying huge sums now to the payoff for that project was more than $70 million out of pocket for the insurance company. So that is all being, relooked at. We're working with the insurance companies now to mitigate some of those costs for decommissioning those systems after and clean up after they're damaged. The other problem is that we're seeing is in the permitting and bonding, that when these systems are damaged or they're abandoned for whatever reason, that the local jurisdiction, the cities and city planners aren't stuck with a bunch of solar panels that are abandoned because they have little or no value, or the cost to reclaim the solar panels are quite high. So bonding is now just beginning to be required across the US, which is adding cost to the systems. Next. Again, this is just talks a little bit about the failures. There's more failures than we realized for a lot of reasons. And again, weather is a big part of that. As temperatures get hotter, the solar panels are made with components that heat up in the sun. They're made to be in the sun. Some of the worst conditions, anywhere, because they're made to be placed in the hottest places, and backskin failures, delamination, these type of things are happening not in 25 years, but what we're seeing is 7 to 12 years. And yes, a lot of these systems or solar panels have a 25-year warranty life, but the problem is the companies that built these are usually going out of business within that 7 to 12-year period. So there's no warranty mechanism at the end of that shorter period to handle the cleanup. Next. Here's just a quick snapshot. Today, a lot of the solar panels are being reused, a high percentage, a little less than half of them. This is just in the US, and they're being resold or reused for off-grid systems especially. But that number is really starting to go down because the price of new panels are so much lower, and the cost of shipping is so much higher. So what we're seeing is more and more systems are not being used. So that numbers is scaling down. Most solar panels are going to landfills, and that's a tragedy because there are a lot of materials in those solar panels that can be recaptured. Next slide. This just shows some of the places that U.S. waste can go to. I mean, it can go to, I think Heidi talked about it, and I've been to these places, really, really desperate countries that have little or no environmental regulations that stop our waste from going to those countries. And that's one place they can go. They can also go. They can be reused and refurbish the panels, and they could be used for a lot of off-grid systems in Africa, Haiti, Mexico, a lot of other places like that. So those are good places for it, or they can be recycled. It's our choice. Next slide. You can just go through a couple of these slides. It just shows some of the damage that we're seeing on a regular basis. The floating system, solar panels are, wind has pulled these systems up. Next slide. This is more of a local one here. Some of these systems have been burnt up. So the solution, there are solutions, and other industries, Paul had talked about it a little bit, and Heidi's real involved with components that need to be collected in a proper way and handled in a proper way, and then sorted and then repaired when possible, and then put back into the field if they can be. Otherwise, recycling is kind of the last effort that happens, and being able to do that in a responsible way, but also in a cost-effective way. And that's one of the challenges we have today, is that if we as as a nation and an industry, a solar industry, if we can pull the solar panels together, that volume, and make the policies happen, then we have enough volume to build the plants to do it economically. The problem is we don't today, because the landfill is basically our competition. Next slide. So here's one of the ideas that we see that could work for handling end of life solar. So, you guys, everybody knows that when you go to buy a new consumer product of different types, and there's a whole host of them. This is a short list, but refrigerators, TVs, most of these consumer electronics and components or products have a limited lifespan, and at that lifespan, they're difficult to recycle. So the fees that we pay up front, usually the end user, that helps subsidize, being able to responsibly handle these. It's just interesting that solar, being sold as green, has no programs, and the cost for today for recycling solar panels in the U.S. is quite high. We're talking about $15 to $25 per panel in the U.S., where it really could be subsidized, we think, for $2 to $4, and we can make that happen in a short period of time. Next. I think if you hit it one more time, there we go. So this is what we're kind of facing. We're facing in the U.S., $15 to even $45. $25 is kind of the average, but we're seeing it as high as $45 in some states to recycle a solar panel in the U.S. They have it down to 90 cents in Europe. They've been doing it for a while. All we have to do is copy some of the processes and procedures that work there and bring that same technology here to the U.S. And we already are buying machines from Europe to do that, to bring them here. We do have challenges. We have the challenges of the U.S. is quite large, and the transportation costs are quite high. So we're still working on that. Next slide. Here's some of the components we pull out. Glass, and I think Heidi talked about glass and recycling of glass in Sacramento. That would be great. The cost of transporting glass is very high. So, and the recovered material, the recycled glass that we remove has a very low value. So, for instance, a ton of glass is worth maybe $80 to $100. That's on the high side, but it costs about $80 to $100 to ship it, even a short distance. So, you try to zero out the glass, recycled glass is difficult. There are other materials that we can make some money off of, but today, because of the volume we have today that we actually can collect, the profit is very, very low. Next. One of the good things that we're seeing is the potential in the US, because there is the volume here. If we have the policies in place to gather those materials, those panels that are being decommissioned, and keeping them out of the landfill and trying to compete with landfill prices, that you can see here the amount of recovery between now and 2050 can be quite good. And also being able to replace those materials back into the field. Silicon, silver, copper, all these materials do have a value, but they are very difficult to extract from the PV solar panel. Next. Yep, I forgot this would come up like that. Here we go. So here's some of the things we've been working on. Some of the machines we've been working on in Europe, trying to bring some of these machines. We have parts of these machines already here. We've imported them into the States, and we're using them now, just getting them set up in Reno. This yellow one on the right is a complete machine that you throw the solar panel in the front, and it separates all the materials into its components very cleanly, and it does it fairly efficiently. It's a little bit slow. It takes about 1 minute per panel, and we'd like to see that about 3 times faster. These machines are really expensive, and in order to make them cost effective, we've got to run them 24 hours a day, and we have to have the feedstock. And right now we can't get enough feedstock in one spot to justify it. Next. Reusing solar panels is something that we try to do whenever we can. We donate a lot of solar panels to Native American foundations and tribes and reservations, mainly for off-grid. But there will be a point when there's too many of those to go through. So being able to find new homes for reuse panels to reuse those is definitely a challenge. And it needs a whole support mechanism. It needs to have training put in place so that there are workers that can go out there and install these panels properly. Next. So one of our mottos, don't let solar go to waste. So being able to reuse these solar panels or to take the components and remanufacture solar panels is what we're doing today, and it's our goal. And it's something that is something we're working on a regular basis, along with policy in the US to make that happen. Next. Here's my contact stuff. So please contact us if you have any questions. We're also looking for employees. So whenever you come across somebody that wants to jump into this industry, please put the word out. Thank you.
Send us
Thanks
a
very
job
much, Sam.
posting,
Excellent.
Sam.